Hi everyone. Today at Miara Health, we are talking to Dr. Yvonne Becker, who brings an extensive background as an experienced child psychologist at her current role as a chief executive at the Child Development Center, Hong Kong. She combines her expertise in clinical, educational, and developmental psychology and is a strong advocate of the importance of play in children, and she's educated in Germany, Australia, and obtained her PhD in special education in Hong Kong. We spoke to you earlier this year, and welcome again to our channel.
Yes, hi again. Lovely to be back.
So, like I said, we spoke to you earlier about all things pandemic and parenting related in July last year. And after a year of living in and out of lockdown in many countries, what have we learned in terms of the development of young children and also of adolescents? So, please tell us.
Sure. I think the greatest link to all of this is, of course, the lockdown, being isolated, not being able to go to school. And so I link it a little bit to that. First of all, I think we've learned that school actually is a great ground to learn academically as well as socially. So we're seeing that rather in sort of from negative evidence, if you like, of how the children behave when they don't go to school, when they have been locked down and in isolation with their parents. So the younger children, we often see more visible signs, right, in behavior. This behavior changes a lot. So they become more irritable, maybe more clingy. They do miss that environment that's constantly changing and challenging them a little bit in their development. So maybe language or, emotionally and socially, there's always things going around when you're in a group, and that is missing. And I think that is actually, let's say, hindering the development a little bit, slowing it down, because there just isn't the opportunity. So that is sort of more on the visible side with the younger children, say primary, mid-primary, and lower. But the older kids and adolescents, I think, of course, they can regulate their emotions better. And so you're looking for a few more subtle signs. And we see more the kind of, again, you're looking for signs you can detect. So more lethargic, sort of more fatigue, not motivated. Sadly not motivated maybe to connect with their friends, and that would be just a sad sign. So again, academically, that's slowing down. Socially, maybe the slowing down as well. And so that these are the signs that we feel are really important, because it tells us what's underlying going on or not going on. So all in all, I think there are some changes that are really impacting the development, and especially the social component being very, very big.
Okay, that's really interesting. But as parents, what kind of support do you think that parents could provide in these different situations with young children as well as with older kids, for example?
I think so. I'd love to sort of just see it through all the ages, and that's called emphasizing family time. So that's sort of underlying it all, keeping the relationships going, and balancing out what? Balancing out everything, balancing out what could be excessive time in front of technology, because of need or because of it's so much easier, right? When you're doing everything through technology. So the balance then means off technology, clearly, right? So there must be things you should emphasize and look for things to do as a family, or as well as me time. So let me talk about that in a minute. But as a family, you're balancing out. If you can go outside, go outside. If you can't, even indoors, do some physical activity, yoga, mental games, something that engages offline, basically. So then you need to balance out, this constantly being together as a family now. That can be intense for any good relationship. So I really love to see that. Some people have to make conscious effort, but it's okay to make any kind of effort or just let it happen, but look after yourself. Have a bit of me time for everybody. So playing by yourself, adults being by themselves. It doesn't all have to be in a group, but it needs that balance. Neither too much of this or that.
Okay.
Right. So that, I think that would apply to everything, balancing the screen time, balancing how much you do one thing or the other, striking a happy medium, knowing when something is too much, and still setting boundaries, even for adolescents. Unfortunately, I've seen parents now trying to compensate and saying, oh, those poor children, right? I'm not sure how they're poor. They're coping with a different situation. It's not necessarily worse or better, but and the parents compensate by letting the children run a little bit more loose than they would have in other times, which is not good. I live in a community which is safe and lovely and everything that has to offer. But I also now see relatively young children, say 8 or 9 years old, running around at nighttime. You know, in a group as kids. We at the moment we're not under lockdown, so it's legal, but these kids would be at home usually. They should be, if not in bed, you know, they should be doing something at home. And yet they're running around like teenagers, grouping, and it's, and when you challenge parents, and I've seen this happen, they go, yeah, you know, but what else can they do at the moment? I think that is not the right tack. That is, you still need to set the boundaries for safety and for development that the kids need, even into adolescence.
Right. And that kind of leads me to the next question. I mean, earlier when we spoke a couple of months ago, you talked about parents not, you know, being resilient themselves so that, you know, they, you know, not showing their stress to their children. But I mean, it's been a year now. So how are parents, you know, how do you prevent that pandemic related stress for parents? I know it's a difficult question, but
it's hard, and everybody has a different threshold, of course, right? But the challenges are big. I mean, it goes from like being technologically challenged and keeping up with the technology and teaching the grandparents to use it, right to being there all the time, and that constant stress. I also see stress in parents because now they're becoming almost the teacher or the main tutor, or, you know, somebody who oversees that, and they may not have realistic expectations of how fast progress should be. So in some cases they're saying, oh, my child is not learning fast enough. In some cases, and it's true that maybe some of them are regressing, right? And so that stresses parents out. So when you look at that, it comes back to your mindset and really looking at it realistically. So some people blame themselves, and that's really sad. And you have to realize you're not a teacher. You're not a trained teacher. And that's the first realization. So take the pressure of you. Understand that the parent-child relationship is different from a teacher-child relationship. And that is not exchangeable. It is what it is. Very few parents are good at homeschooling and can tolerate it, right? And so take away that pressure and say, I'm doing the best I can. Don't have unrealistic expectations, either developmentally from your child or from yourself, and saying everything has to be perfect. I need to create an environment or a learning path that resembles what has been happening. You can't, right? And I think that realizing that, or taking some pressure off yourself, don't be too harsh on yourself. That helps your mental health and your strength. At the same time, when it gets too much, notice your threshold and your boiling point. And before it gets to that and you become really frustrated in a situation, remove yourself. As long as your children are safe, just say to yourself, okay, I'm just going to go to the next room. Sorry, I need a bit of, just breathe and, you know, slow down and compose myself again. Otherwise, I'm going to explode, or, you know, I'm going to shout. I don't want to do that. So it's realizing your boundaries, your own boundaries, and not being too harsh on yourself. I think that's the best thing you can do for your own self and your mental health.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. But also this idea of screen time, I know we discussed it in our previous interview, the screen time and the effects of it, because now it's more a necessity than anything else. So how is it going to affect the children's development? I mean, it's different from our generation to this generation, right? For sure. So,
So, and it's something I think we need to get comfortable with, right? Because it was a novelty, certainly for my generation, and we've gradually come to accept it, but we're not as savvy for sure. We're you know, just reaching kind of, oh yeah, I'm doing minimal on it. Now it's like you said, it's part of life. It's a necessity to connect, to do your work, to do your school. And so definitely we will see signs of that affecting development, because it's we know from the way our brain is structured, it's not healthy to live in a 2D world, right?
Yeah.
Our brain is structured to live in a 3D environment. And so I already see signs with children, they struggle with building with blocks. They struggle building with puzzles. So a puzzle in real life, an interconnecting puzzle, is very different from a puzzle. Even when it resembles it on the screen, you just swipe it. You slide the puzzle into place, and it sort of clicks in automatically, right?
Yeah.
Now you don't get that. You don't even get that sensory experience of it clicks in. Or if you just have it a little bit wrong, a little bit twisted and tilted, it doesn't go in. So that is really important information for the brain and experience in order to cope in the 3D world. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is there's a lot of written information, a lot of visual information, and not so much output from us. So it's a lot of receiving, a lot of taking in. Yeah. So our expressive skills are actually going to suffer, or their expressive skills, not hopefully too much. And it's, of course, it's individualized. They're still our chatter boxes. Doesn't matter what you do with them. But in general, that practice would be lacking, that language expression. And especially the language expression in different social scenarios. Yeah, it's fine when the teacher calls you and you can say something and you give the right answer, but all that chit chat, that social nuance stuff, even the reading of nonverbal cues, that's going to be really, it's going to be difficult. That's going to be an interesting effect. And of course, motor wise, especially for the younger children, they're going to be slower, a little bit more delay. We'll see. We even saw it before COVID. We've seen it here in Hong Kong, very academic environment, where we sometimes call the children physically illiterate. I love that term because it means they're not as agile, they're not climbing trees. The opportunity has been lacking here, and there are signs that it will improve. The government is looking at improving the playgrounds, for example, in a big scale, which is great. But COVID will have the same effect. The children will not have been outside so much practicing and climbing and just being in an environment and moving around in an environment.
Right.
So it's not all lost. I'm hoping that it's just going to be talking delays. Delays always means you catch up eventually, right?
Yeah.
Rather than detrimentally not having that skill at all.
Exactly.
So I think that's what we're going to see, some delays for sure.
I mean, I know I focused a lot on parenting, but the education itself is changing, right? Like the classrooms are changing. So from a educator's perspective as well, what do you think? There's had to be a lot of adaptation to the whole situation. So could you comment on that?
And I think schools are learning as we go along, right? So we also have to be kind to the schools. It's not that they're totally prepared either.
Exactly.
And it's like that. Wow, it's getting better and better. And I think different effects that we see. For example, the changes that I've seen already is teaching a whole big group in say 20 to 30 children, right? It's very different than having them online.
Yeah.
And the bigger the group, actually, and we adults do it too. The bigger, I say, we go to online conference, virtual this or that. And the bigger the group, actually, the more you tend to, sometimes do your own things,
switch off,
switch the camera off, and then whatever, have a little cup of tea. But the same with children. And I think the teachers especially, now finding that it's much, much more productive if they regroup them into smaller groups and have children in groups of 2 or 3, and then they do a little exercise. And these kids, sort of, it's like almost like breakout rooms, right? Although you can't leave the other kids unattended, but it's almost possible, because as long as another adult sitting there, it's actually cool for parents. But the educators, I think, are learning to deal with that and saying, how can we maximize and optimize that new scenario? So the first thing is the regrouping, giving little exercises to do, and then giving them little breaks, which is great for children who do need lots of breaks, and saying, okay, I have you for 15 minutes online. Now, Johnny, go and do this. And this is new territory for everyone. But I'm excited to see that this is happening where possible. Of course, the younger the children, the smaller the groups need to be. The older kids are coping better. clearly. So from adolescence onwards, it doesn't really matter if they're by themselves or in a larger group. Again, they need to be encouraged to speak more. Some are very passive. The ones who tend to be passive anyway, they become even more passive. And it becomes people who chat all the time, the same people chatting all the time. So we see things again with people tend to sort of follow their characteristics and personality. And for the educators, it will be even more challenging or maybe more noticeable that this needs to be balanced, right? And drawing out that person who tends to be quiet and then saying to the other person who's a little bit more chatty, say, okay, you can go off now and do this on your own while I focus more on the other person.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities. And I think hopefully we will learn to maximize those opportunities. Yeah, in the education field.
That's really interesting. But I mean, what do you think would be the long-term effects of the pandemic on learning, socialization? So for example, young children are missing out on learning things like, skills, like new skills like swimming, or, in Switzerland, it's skiing, or and also for older kids, this, this group, peer socialization. So what do you think would be the long-term effects of that? Because of the pandemic? I mean, what can you, I mean, I know it's not really something you can foresee, but
it's, I think they're going to be very technology wise children. They're going to be earlier maybe than we want them to be.
Yeah.
So those, again, that's more, it's partially physical skill because it is fine motor related, partially a little bit of cognitive problem solving things. But the other skills, like I mentioned earlier, we need to make sure that they don't suffer, right? Human beings are actually geared to live in small groups and to be interactive. And if that is not given opportunity in the early ages, I don't think I can predict what's going to happen, but there will be awkward people, right? People will not be able to really deal in group situations because the opportunities you'll have online via online means and modes are limited. Yeah, there's exchange. Yes, there's this and that, but you're not dealing with a whole spectrum of interactions that you would have to. So these people will be lacking maybe the know-how and the nuances of dealing with really being in a group situation, maybe even compromising, and those kind of subtle things that we need in life. So it's hard to predict how long-term the effects will be. Some things you mentioned, like probably skiing or going swimming, that can be learned later. That adults can still learn those, but like languages, for example, right? If you expose a child early in life, they can probably obtain or they get to a near native level, if not native level. If you learn that later in life, you be good, but you may never be quite that native level, right? So people will still do things. People find ways, interesting ways I've seen of interacting, which is great. But it's everybody's saying that already now. It's not a compensation for what we really are capable of and what we need to develop and to function. So easy to say when you cut any of those opportunities and experiences and room for practice, there's going to be a long-term effect for sure. Some skills can be learned. It's the social things, the subtle things that might be different. So that's going to be interesting to see.
And also the connection to family, like for example, grandparents and things that children have, especially young children who when they haven't seen their grandparents for a while or extended family members for a while. I mean, that's going to take a toll on them as well, just to form that connection, I would think.
I would think so. And then it's up to us as adults to be patient. You can't expect somebody you've never seen or you've only seen through a screen, right? To suddenly come up, run and hug and be lovey-dovey, because that takes time to build that real relationship. It's not, to them, I'm trying to imagine what they see. They see everything on screen. They see everything online and they grow up with this. And the young children think that's the world, right? And people are only like that. And then suddenly you say to somebody, well, that's your grandma, and you're supposed to hug them. And you go, but she's no different from what I've seen, all the other people I've seen on screen.
On the screen, yeah.
Right? So that's going to be an interesting thing. And I think we need to make sure that we tell them how grandma is different from the other people, or to not expect that immediate click of a relationship when we do come back in person, but to give it time and to nurture that. And let it gradually build and grow. Yeah. But definitely bring in the grandparents as much as you can, because you need that, at least that basic connection, to have anything grow from there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, I mean, I think we discussed a wide variety of topics now, but just to kind of wrap up, like, where do we go from here? Like, in terms of parenting and the children's mental health, where do we go?
I think parents, be mindful to look after yourselves, because you are driving a lot of things, you're overseeing a lot of things. The guidance the children need, the balance that children need comes basically from the parents' initiative. So it's important that parents look after themselves and keep looking after themselves and pace themselves. At the same time, we need to balance out the development of children. And a little bit, of course, that also is determined by the child's personality and characteristics. If you have a child that's a little bit more passive, you make sure that they keep being active and interactive. And a child that's a little bit more physically active, you need to make sure, yes, they need to have that outlet, but also learn to occupy themselves, or, have calm minutes. So that balancing act and making sure everything is addressed is becoming very important. Until we resume in person, it would be nice to see, because it is something we do need for human development.
Yeah. So on that note, I think, let's hope that everything is just on the getting better in the future. And of course, you brought out some very important points of parents being mindful and then, helping their children through this process. So thank you very much for this discussion. And,
you're most welcome.
And if you have any links or some things you can share, we can put it in the description box for our audience. Thank you very much.